It's the Blakk Port, aka Kukushonamo, and here we speak truth to power. Now, I just returned from Uganda. And even before I went to Uganda, one name always resonated. Not only with me, but the rest of Africa. There was a deadly dictator in that country called IDI AMIN. IDI AMIN Dada, Field Marshal. He had all the power in the country vested in him. He could do and undo anything. He could make a man a woman and a woman a man. The only thing he could not do was to create human beings. That was how much power he had. Aside God, he was the greatest. People feared him. In his regime, murderous as it was, bishops of the church were assassinated. Men of God were terrorized. In fact, doctors and nurses feared him because it was said that he ordered them to heal him rather than cure him. I am sick. I want to get well in the next 30 minutes. People feared him. Many people were abducted, enemies and frenemies, and they were buried in shallow graves after. This is IDI AMIN Dada. He had so much power, the world even feared him. He stood against Israel and called Israel a thieving nation. He said the Israelis are thieves. He was a great supporter of Palestine. He himself a Muslim. It looks like, aside him, Uganda is yet to have another Muslim president or leader in the presidency. I went to Uganda and I started asking people on the street of Uganda who they thought was the best leader or president they had ever had. And shockingly, 60% and even more of the people mentioned IDI AMIN. But around the world, we all have been told about the murderous regime of IDI AMIN. How he slaughtered people in cold blood. How he was a terrible womanizer who would take people's wives, and if their husbands coughed, they entered early graves permanently. IDI AMIN Dada. He worshipped Allah. He went to the mosque on Friday to pray. He fasted in the month of Ramadan. He even went to Hajj. So he was Al-Hajj. IDI AMIN Dada. Now, something happened in 1972. IDI AMIN ordered all Asians to leave Uganda because they are taking over the whole of Uganda. The businesses and the indigenous people were suffering. And he gave them 90 days, 3 months. And if you stayed beyond 90 days, you would enter an early grave. And look at it. As published in the days. 50 years later, it's been remembered. Ugandan Asians, 50 years under IDI AMIN's rule. 50 years after the ruling, the order that all Asians should leave. This is what we can see. And look at it. Ugandan Asians, 50 years since their expulsion from Uganda. And this was published on Wednesday, the 31st of August, 2022. That was when it was 50 years exactly. So we are in 2025. You add 3 years more. But look at the story, written by Thomas Brown. He says, on the 4th of August 1972, Ugandan President IDI AMIN gave his country's Asian population 90 days in which to leave the country. Almost 40,000 Ugandan Asians would come to the UK over the months that followed to start new lives, leaving behind homes and businesses in the country of their birth. A national commemorative event will take place in London on 18 September 2022, 50 years after the first evacuation flight landed at the Stansted Airport. That's it. So that's it. 1972. IDI AMIN gave all Asians, Indians, Chinese, especially Indians, and they were not just Indians, they were Indian Ugandans. There are Asians who are Ugandans, born in Uganda. And by the laws of Uganda, they are Ugandans. And when you go to Uganda today, there are ancient monasteries all over the place, belonging to the Chinese, the Indians, and so on and so forth. They had a huge population of Indians. And the Indians owned so many shops and businesses. And Idi Amin felt that the indigenous people of Uganda were being robbed of what should have come to them. And for that matter, he gave all Asians 90 days to leave. Those who did not leave, they died. They were killed. But Idi Amin himself did not live long after that in power. 7 years later, in 1979, he himself was chased out of the presidency and he fled with the help of his cousin, Malia Mungu. So many things were said about Idi Amin. Oh, he was a cannibal. Because in his ethnicity, if you killed your enemy, you needed to eat a bit of his flesh to make you invincible towards any other enemy. Idi Amin Dada, he spoke English the way he liked it. And he always laughed. There was no time he didn't. He didn't hide his flirtatious nature. And many Ugandans today say he's the best leader Uganda has ever had. Even though the president now, Kaguta Museveni, denied him re-entry into Uganda. All other political prisoners and exilists were asked to return home and be freed, except Idi Amin Dada, the field marshal, the man who grabbed all military posts and vested that upon himself as the leader of Uganda. There was a lady, a little Indian girl by name Vasanti Makwana. Oh my God. This little girl was Indian. Her parents were forced to run out of India and they ran away. They found themselves in England, also in Canada, never to return to Uganda. And then she trained as a nurse right there in Canada. Oh Lord. Then a time came when nurses were needed in Saudi Arabia. And she decided to be part of it. She went to Saudi Arabia and in one of the hospitals in 2003. What did I say? 2003. She arrived in the hospital. Doctors had closed. Some were taking some little respite. And then there was a patient who was brought in emergency. And she rushed to save the life of this patient. When she looked at the face of the patient, you know who it was? You know who the patient was? Idi Amin Dada. The man who had sacked her parents all the way from Uganda. And that's Idi Amin lying down there. She decided to take this photo for the sake of posterity, for the rest of the story. Let's listen to this woman by name Vasanti Makwana. And when we return, we'll close the show. Watch this.
I think the first few days, everyone must have been in shock. But us as children, it was like, okay, what's going to happen? We just didn't know. We didn't really have the impact of what is to be at that moment. For a few days, it was like that. Nobody was sure what was going to happen, what's going on. So it was like that for a few days, at least maybe a couple of weeks before it started to sink in people's minds that this is for real and we have to leave in 90 days. My father was, like I told you, he was an engineer and he would be going to different ginneries. So he was coming home from one such trip, and on the road he saw horrendous things, like because his car had to stop, and before that there was a bus load of people, and they had gotten all the people out, and they were young girls like 14, 15, 12, and what those goons did to those young girls, my father saw with his own eyes. So when he came home, he was ashen. And he told my mother, we have to leave. We have two girls because, like I said, I was 14 and my sister was just 11. And we need to get out of here. And that was it. And we left the next day. I don't recall exactly when the banks had frozen everybody's accounts, but I remember my father saying that that's it, money is frozen. So I think we had about 45 pounds, sterling pounds, to take with us. And that's us, the children, and my parents. So that was it. Why was I on call on that particular night? And why was I the first one to see him so sick and to be able to help him? I was on call for dialysis. So it was in the middle of the night. At around 2 o'clock, I got the phone call from the supervisors at the hospital that there is a VIP coming in to be treated for dialysis, and he's very sick and he needs to be dialyzed ASAP. And they were going to send me the car from the hospital to pick me up at my compound because in Saudi, women were not allowed to drive at that time, so you always had to have a driver. So when the car came and I was ready and I went over to the hospital, and that's when I found out that his name is IDI AMIN and that he needs to be treated. When I saw IDI AMIN, I didn't think it would be the IDI AMIN. I thought, oh, maybe somebody's name is similar to the dictator. But when I did see him being wheeled in my unit, that's when it sank in that, oh my God, this is the IDI AMIN Dada. I had only a few minutes before he was being taken care of by the ICU personnel that I was able to talk to him. I had talked to him previously in my unit when they'd wheeled the gurney with him, and he held on my hand and said, please help me, please help me. I'm a very sick man. And I said, yes, sir, we will help you. Don't worry. You're in good hands. And then when he was in ICU, that's the time I was able to have just a few moments, very few, maybe not even a couple of minutes, to be able to tell him that I'm one of those Ugandan Asians who he had kicked out. And don't worry, because he looked at me with big eyes, and I said, don't worry, I will not harm you. I will help you to get better. And but I needed to tell him, the little girl in me needed to tell him that my father never forgave you for doing this to us, because my father loved Uganda. I mean, that was his home, that was our home. And I was able, thank God I was able to tell him, because it's something I needed to come out and let him know that this is what he did to us, and yet I will help him. There was no question in my mind that I would not help him. Honestly, after I had said what I needed him to know, everything just was gone. And I had the most compassion for him. I really did feel sorry for him. Whatever we do in this life, it comes back to us. We pay back while we are here on this earth, because that was what my experience was with Idi Amin. That whatever he did, it came back full force, and hence that's the title of my story, that Full Circle with Idi Amin.
Well, what a story. Asante Makwana. Indian woman with a combination of Indian and Ugandan names. She said they loved Uganda, but they were forced to leave. But again, I said I was in Uganda, and my survey told me statistically that Idi Amin is the best ruler they have had in the country. And if Idi Amin is considered a dictator, a murderous vampire, a cannibal, and he's still the best, then you can imagine what kind of leaders they have in Uganda. In fact, in another edition, I'll play you a tape where the president, anytime he's coming into the city, all cars stop, all roads are blocked. And we have videos of this. He doesn't come to town just once a week. He could come every day. Convoy, gun-wielding soldier and police, and you dare not cross the line. Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, and he hated Idi Amin with passion. My brother, my sister, Idi Amin died a few days after. But Vasanti was so happy that she was able to tell the story. It's a story of forgiveness. It's a story of letting go. It's a story of professionalism. She could have just injected him and killed him because her parents died in pain and anguish caused by Idi Amin. People who were born and bred in Uganda. They were Ugandans, but he considered them Asians and kicked them out, took over their businesses, froze their accounts, and sent them into strange lands where he didn't care what happened to them. That was in 1972. 70 years later, in 79, Idi Amin himself was overthrown. And he found himself in a Saudi hospital where a 14-year-old girl who was kicked out of Uganda, now a full-grown nurse, is called in to come and take care of him because there was no other person to do it. Look at the time she mentioned, the dead of the night. It's the Blakk Pot. And when she mentioned it, she said, Idi Amin's eyes shot like those of a rattlesnake, shocked because he felt that he was going to die. This woman will kill me, will never forgive me. He only had to shake his head. But she said, I'm professional. I won't hurt you. I'll help you get well. Don't fret. It's the Blakk Pot, a.k.a. Kukushunumi. Look, the only thing that ever frightened Idi Amin was not the gun. Neither was it the threat of the West. It was the words of a 14-year-old who was kicked out of Uganda in 1972 and had become a grown-up woman now whose hands held the life of Idi Amin. And if she squeezed the life, Idi Amin was gone in darkness. But she decided to open her hands even wider to give Idi Amin yet another chance for life. What would you have done? It's the Blakk Pot, a.k.a. Kukushonomo, and here we speak truth to power.